And now we have 4 persons here who will address out of their experience and their knowledge, also directly to David, of course. So David, you have to have a note and write down so you are ready to answer later on. But the first one in this row is a friend of me from Sweden. He's not a real Swedish. He's half Danish and half Swedish now, I think. So welcome here, Jan Öberg. Nej, that one is functioning. Yeah, the technical
nu är den på. Vad fint.
and everything. The floor is yours.
Gammeldansk. Thank you so much for the invitation to come here, and I am happy, grateful, and honored to speak at this occasion where my dear friend David, who is also an associate of our foundation in Lund, gets the Real Nobel Peace Prize. You deserve it more than anyone else. Point 2, I am equally happy, grateful, and honored to speak on an occasion that is basically here thanks to my other dear friend, Frederick. And as a little piece of history, he and I started the work to create a global awareness about the fake Nobel Peace Prize. That happened in 2007 when Al Gore got it, and we agreed to do something about it. Now, for various reasons, he did 99.9% of the work, as you can see here and all that. But I'm quite happy to have been a little part of this work that he felt was so necessary to do, and we have been in contact very frequently the last time, 3 days before he died. And permit me now also to say something very personal. I am not grateful. I'm not honored to speak in the capital of a country. The state authorities, the health and legal authorities of which made the life of my mentor and friend over 50 years, Johan Galtung's last months a hell. Johan, in my view, and there's all reason to mention him at a Peace Prize, also because he never got it, is as big as in his field as Ibsen is in his and Munch is in his. There ought by now to be a street of Johan Galtung. There ought to be now a monument to Johan Galtung. There won't be in this state. And that's something you people from Norway should begin to discuss. Why is that so? Now, the wonderful speech you gave, I would characterize, David, as fantastic diagnosis and prognosis. And if I may, I would try to build on therapy and treatment, which is, of course, normally received as, that's very idealistic. But I do it for 2 reasons with reference to 2 people. And those 2 people is the Queen of Peace Research, Elise Boulding, who said people will never work for something they cannot imagine. That means we need future workshops and imaginative workshops about what the future could be. And that relates to a quotation that allegedly Bernard Shaw used. Most people look at the world as it is and ask why. What we should do much more is to look at the world as it could be and ask why not. A peace movement that does not ask the last question is not a peace movement. It's an anti-militarist, anti-war, anti-weapons, and fantastic as such, but it's not a peace movement. So I will try to describe within the, was it 2 hours we had? 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours, okay, that's Norwegian hours, so that means 15 minutes in Swedish time. I mean, you're a little slower, so. The future world, and then I'll tell how we get to it. The future world will be one of cooperation. It will be one of multipolarity. It will be nodes, perhaps more than poles, because poles is something that is stuck in the ground, you know, like a Greek temple, but it might be nodes, that is some networking that moves all the time with some centers, nodes that connect with each other. And it will be a world in which there will be much more equality. There will be much higher technology, things we don't know today. And it's not only self-driving cars from China, there will be lots of other things that we can hardly imagine at the moment. There will be technology for creating global governance. And global governance means that what we call national democracy should be extended to the globe. Why on earth can we only vote for our national parliament, where less and less important discussions and decisions are taken? I'd like that we can vote for all those who represent us in international organizations. Why do we have a UN ambassador, an ambassador to NATO, and we have never elected these people? I would like to have UN embassies in all countries so that they could check up whether nation states and member states follow the resolutions they have signed. Or Article 1 of the UN Charter, which says that peace shall be established by peaceful means. It's high time we begin to think of that. I'd like a much stronger United Nations in which we do not invest 400 times more in the military than we do in the United Nations total budget. No wonder that they cannot do miracles. But give them 100 times a bigger budget, reform it, give it a general assembly for peoples and environment, etc. And it's perfectly possible, given the fantastic charter, because the charter is the most Gandhian document governments have ever signed. Don't throw out the UN. Ask your country whether it does what it should as good UN members, and the answer is no in 99% of the cases, including Norway. Nobody's taking Article 1 serious, or the abolition of war that is in the preamble of the UN. A peace movement that is not a staunch believer in the UN Charter is not a peace movement in my view. When it comes to security, I share, of course, David's idea of abolishing war. But it'll take a little time. And if we have told people again and again that security isn't weapons, the one step towards it, one station towards a non-military world could be defensive defense that can only be used to defend your own country and with little capacity to destruction and short distance. These are long things that also Johan Galtung and I and many others worked with in the 80s. Human security, global security, and the Olof Palme Commission, common security. All the thoughts, all the ideas, all the theories, all the concepts are there. We just need to move positively with something that could be, and not just criticize the madness of the present, the kakistocracy that runs the Western world. If you wonder what kakistocracy is, it's a political term. It means governance by the least able and the worst people. And that's where the Western world is at the moment, very clearly. So the good news is a better world is perfectly possible. We just have to think about it. We have to have seminars. We have to write white books. We have to have research institutes in Scandinavia that works with a better future and not with US-financed security research. There is virtually no peace research left in Scandinavia, which was a center of global peace research. And so what is peace? Peace is to develop security and secure development for all people and for each person. And what is peace research? It is an endeavor to reduce all kinds of violence, exactly as medicine is an endeavor to reduce all kinds of diseases. Now, so how do we get to that better world of cooperation, human security? Modern technology, better democracy, global governance, not global government, I said global governance. And a world that I share with David has no borders. In the long run, borders is a bad idea. It already is a bad idea. We get to it the day the US empire is over. That is a main impediment for creating a better world. And Johan said it would go down in 2020. And then he thought it would be a little faster because of George Bush and the war on terror. I would say 2030. And you ask why? Because of the war on terror, that is a great disaster since 2001, 9/11, and which has created more terrorism because the idiots could not ask the question, why did they become terrorists, but just killing terrorists. Terrorism is something you can combat, as the Chinese have done, but the Americans have not done it. They have created more terrorism. Secondly, all the wars we've been fighting, America has lost all the wars, being the strongest military power in human history. And then you have Nord Stream, then you have NATO's expansion, and you have the NATO-Russia conflict that is played out on Ukrainian soil. This is not a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. This is a NATO-Russia conflict that plays out there. And then the genocide in Gaza. Now you add up these things to each other, there is no way that Western empire can survive those 5 things that we have done the last 20 years. So it's over, no matter who becomes the president of the United States. It's embarrassing to see this incredible attention, obsession with who would win the American elections. America is not run, and the empire is not run by presidents. It's managed a little bit. Image making on the top, there's a system that has to fall, and it's called the MIMAC, the Military Industrial Media Academic Complex. MIMAC, the Military Industrial Media Academic Complex. Just get rid of it and we have a better world. It is less than 1% of humanity. But they are investing these things in warfare. They can't live without enemy images. And let me tell you, as a peace researcher with roughly 50 years of experience, also from my working in a hell of a lot of countries and conflict zones and war zones, there are no enemies against the West, and there's nobody who wants to destroy the West. It's a psychological disease and paranoia that has nothing to do with the reality. These guys live into a narrative, and they live in that narrative because it pleases the military industrial media academic complex. So I wish us all good luck in stopping just criticizing things, doing future workshops, developing strategies for a better world, and listen to Bernard Shaw. Ask yourself first, what would a better world look like, and then work for it, because everybody gives up in the long run to just work against something and seeing it not succeeding. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you saw that I got this idea that we should give David maybe 1 or 2 minutes if you comment on this. So are you ready, David? Okay. just a few words.
I thought it was 1 or 2 minutes to reply to everyone. It's
no, you
to reply to each person.
To...
So, well, wonderful vision of the future, which I completely agree we need, and we don't have a peace movement if we're only an anti-war movement, just as we don't have a useful movement if we're only for peace in our hearts and we don't oppose wars. We have to have both parts. And I love this idea of envisioning the world we want, and we try to do this at World Beyond War with a book called A Global Security System, an alternative to war. But there's some great ideas here from Jan, including that we can use technology for global governance. I hope we can. I think to a great extent we could now with existing technology if we had the will to do it. And I would love to see not just electing people to the UN, and not just abolishing the veto and democratizing the UN so they have something to do there, but also direct democracy. There's no reason. I mean, we have the technology now. People in the United States, in a couple of states, were allowed to vote up the minimum wage, and they did. They could have voted down the military budget. They just aren't asked to. They aren't given that opportunity. We almost had the requirement in the United States for a public vote before any war, but we wouldn't have had any more wars. But that was in the 1930s, and it's not been heard of again since. But we do have the technology to have a lot more global governance, local governance, direct governance at every level, as well as representative. I couldn't agree more. I do think if we replaced the U.S. empire with this vision of the world we need, we'd be done with war forever. But if we replace the U.S. empire with a balancing act between 2 or 3 empires, or a new empire that's in charge, or a bunch of mini warring states, we're still going to have war. We have to replace it with international law, global governance, diplomacy, not a new empire. And the popular, I mean, you can make this phrase go for like 3 hours, but the popular phrase now in the United States is MICI-MAT, which is the Military Industrial Congressional Intelligence Media Academic Think Tank Complex. But intelligence meaning spying, nothing intelligent about it whatsoever. Anyway, wonderful speech. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yeah. We are not satisfied only with the cake. We want the whole bakery, for sure. Ingeborg, welcome here, my old friend Ingeborg. All these people are my friends. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Tomas. And dear David, dear friends, I actually thought I would start with a small poem by Adela Pankhurst that has been with me since I got my first child. And it goes like this. I didn't raise my son to be a soldier. I brought him up to be my pride and joy. Who dares put a weapon on his shoulder to kill another mother's darling boy? Then a question. Is it not incredible that the old, one-eyed, archie-patriarchal credo of the Roman Empire, si vis pacem para bellum, if you want peace, prepare for war, continues to dominate geopolitical thinking and action, despite the fact that history has shown us that using these enormous resources, financial and natural, for building oversized military defense system, so-called defense system, does not make us safe, does not prevent war and bring peace. On the contrary, it leads to polarization, building of enemy images, to war, destruction of human life, infrastructure, and livelihoods. It pollutes air, water, and soil, and leads to the massive killing of innocent people, to poverty and misery. As peace professor Johan Galtung, often mentioned here, said, security does not lead to peace, but peace leads to security. Neither humanity nor the planet can take this misguided thinking anymore. We cannot allow warfare to be prioritized over welfare. The killing of thousands of young men and the genocide in Gaza is unbearable. There is an urgent need for a paradigm shift, for a non-violent humanistic revolution. Perhaps the first step would be for us to find ways to stop the militarization of our minds. Right now, we have given the hawks in the East and the West the possibility to dominate the official narrative. Military personnel, with or without uniforms, daily explain the world situation through the mainstream media in military terms, using war rhetoric and war strategies and enemy images, hate and revenge, not on how to find peaceful solutions to conflicts and differences. It probably has a very negative influence on young people, as we can witness through school violence, violence in the street, and violence in society. Young people should not have to listen to this, nor be misled to accept war and violence as normal. They need inspiration that can broaden their minds and give them hope of being able to help the world develop peacefully and with justice and opportunities for all. Today, when humanity is faced with multiple existential threats, such as the dramatic changes in climate and destruction of the environment and natural diversity, such as the modernization and proliferation of nuclear weapons, and such as the growing inequality when a few owns far too much and others own not enough for their survival. Then militarization is certainly not the answer. It is horrific that the world spends, according to SIPRI, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, more than $2.4 trillion a year on the military, whilst, as has already been said, the UN is left with a small fraction for their important work. And if you take only 8 days of the military budget, you can give 12 years free quality education to all children in the world. That would have been an investment in peace and development. Coming from the Arctic, I dread all these new US military bases coming in addition to the existing spy and surveillance installation of the US and NATO. I dread the nuclear submarines and naval ships in our harbors and the military exercises, ever bigger, ever closer to the Russian border. It makes my peaceful home region a potential arena for confrontation between superpowers and for total destruction. It is high time that we, the West, look into our own roles, our double standards, what and how we contribute to the ongoing wars and armed conflicts. We constitute some 10% of the world's population, but own almost 60% of the military might. Is it not time to get ourselves out of the dependence of the military-industrial complex? Is it not time to leave the ideas of the neoliberal Washington consensus established by the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and US in 1989, with its focus on privatization, free flow of people, services, and products, and the downsizing of the political power, both of nations and nation-states and people? The market forces, the multinational companies, even marginalize the UN, including by insisting on their own so-called rules-based world order, which is another way of saying our order, the one that profits themselves, and stand in clear opposition to international law as developed over the years by enlightened individuals and gathered under the flag of the UN. I would like just to mention a few issues that I find of high importance in order to counter the ongoing militarization. I want my part of the taxes that I pay to go not to the military, but instead to be directed to peace organizations, real peace research, and to a much-needed ministry for peace. I want all member states of this world of this world's biggest war machinery, NATO, to use Article 13 of the Atlantic Treaty, which says that if you have been 1 year in the organization, you can leave. It's just to tell the United States, and they will tell the others. I want the Nordic countries with our 47 new US military bases to start the closing processes and develop into a neutral region, joining the non-aligned movement. And I want Europe not to be a battleground, but a common home, as Mikhail Gorbachev so wonderfully spoke about in his forward-looking Murmansk speech. I want all school children and youth to get peace education, learn nonviolent conflict resolution, and become not only responsible citizens of their own country, but also world citizens. And I want the UN to be properly funded, to be free of the veto rights and of the powerful, and be empowered to enact what is their primary goal, as described in the UN Charter, to save future generations from the scourge of war. To me, the UNESCO vision and program on a culture of peace is the most holistic and well-researched existing alternative to militarization and militarized security policies, and should be revived now, 24 years since it was inspiring the entrance to a new millennium with its program for moving from cultures of war and violence towards cultures of peace and nonviolence. But all action that inspires peace, that enriches our lives intellectually and artistically, that encourages us to learn to live peacefully with each other and cherish our differences instead of fearing them, are valuable and welcome. So today it is a pleasure to be among many here to applaud your work and engagement, David Swanson, the work of your organization, World Beyond War, and all other serious peace and disarmament organizations. And I would also like to take this occasion to thank both Tomas Magnusson and John Jones for implementing Frederick's will so well. And we give an extra thought to Frederick for his lifelong dedication to peace work, his empathic work for the International Peace Bureau, for his book, and for the generous establishment of this new organization. I have, however, to admit that I so much would have liked, and I have told both John and Thomas, that this prize should bear the name of the organization and be called the Lay Down Your Arms Prize, and not have a name indicating opposition to another prize. The need of change of name is particularly apparent this year when the Nobel Peace Prize to the Hibakushas and their high fight against nuclear weapons is really a real peace prize. And we would hope, of course, there will come more such prizes. Dear friends, we all have a lot of work to do. We need to put peace on the top of our priorities, even above being right. For as the late German politician Willy Brandt said, peace might not be all, but without peace, all is nothing.
Thank you, Ingeborg.
Well, I'm a strange peace activist because I love to argue with people, and my favorite thing is to find things to disagree with. And I'm really struggling in this room because there's nothing that I disagree with. I would love to take each of these speeches we're hearing and put them on social media. And I would love for the little video that Donald Trump made this morning to be true, where he says, I want social media to have no algorithms controlling what you see, but actually people can actually democratically make the things they like get seen, because these would get seen. You know, they wouldn't be buried by some computer. They would be popularized. And you know, this is what we need. I think this, you know, if you want peace, prepare for war, is the core problem in so many people's brains, and it needs to be fixed. And in the United States, you can talk to people who think this, and you can ask them about the most recent 5, 10, 20, 50 wars, and they'll agree with you that each and every one was a disaster and a catastrophe. And they'll either claim it was just a horrible string of bad luck, they weren't properly done, we picked the wrong wars, or they'll start to think maybe something's a little bit wrong with war making. Either way, they will jump to the topic of World War II and say, World War II trumps everything, and someday, maybe it won't be for 80 more years, we'll have another war like World War II, a good war. And because of that, we have to dump all our resources into weapons, deprive all our schools and our hospitals, destroy the environment, you know, roadblock cooperation on any other catastrophes, and have all these thousands of wars that we all agree are horrible because we might get another good one someday. And this is why one of the books I brought, I think they're all gone, was about World War II, because what they think World War II was is not what World War II was. Yeah. And getting that again would not satisfy their longing for a good war. But this is what we have to keep doing. Thank you for wonderful remarks.
Thank you. So, next speaker will be Marielle Leraand, who is the leader of the new party. And I would like to give you a small idea, maybe advice from my experience, because, you know, I'm very proud of the time. One of the best things I did when I was president of the International Peace Bureau, I came directly from being chairman in Gothenburg for the YMCA movement, and we introduced a co-chairmanship there, one man and one woman. And I brought that idea to IPB, and we worked together for 3 years as co-president of IPB, and that system has continued now. So this is a good idea for this new party, I think. Think about it, but speak first. Yeah.
Yes, how to stop today's militarization. What would Frederick have said? Well, Frederick, where are you? What we see, I think that you would have said, look out in Europe today. Look out in Norway. How does the Norwegian society look like now? And pre-Ukrainian war, for example. What has happened the last year in Norway is that we have pumped up the military budget to historical heights. Pre-Ukraine war in 2021, we used here in Norway 66.4 billion Norwegian kroner in the military budget, and now it is up to 110. And we are also pushing it up these coming years, so it will be 130 billion. It will be a doubling pre-Ukrainian war. So, okay, we're using all this money on the military, and people are just saying, yes, we have to do it. Because, you know, we have this neighbor over there, is Putin, and we have to, of course, we have to pump up our military system. But then you also have people all over Norway now seeing that they have to cut. Everywhere, they are cutting schools, they are they're closing schools all over Norway, kindergartens, money that should go to the elderly. So rich Norway with all the oil fund and so on, we see the consequences. But there is no party in parliament makes us aware of the connection. That, okay, we have to do this. We have to fight, Putin. Everyone thinks that's nearly Norway. I'm sorry to tell you, David, but that's the truth. There's a small minority, like us assembled here today, who thinks otherwise. But on the other hand, there is no party who makes the connection. So there is no debate in the society about where does the money come from. Is it just kind of heaven spread money, singling down, it's dripping down from the sky? No, it is not. And it's also not from the oil fund. It is from other budget posts. And even when, even the Prime Minister said, okay, now we have to make some difficult, hard choices the coming years. Even then, there is no real connection that, of course, they're cutting the budgets because of the military spending. And, of course, it will be a day of our everyday lives in the coming years. So I think we need a movement who is doing the same as they are doing out in Europe now. People are seeing the connection between you have to fight the wars, but you also have to fight social war. So we are a member of a network, a European network. Its name is Against War, Against Social War. And I think it's great to have this connection in mind. Because when I'm out in the streets and we are fighting, the genocidal war, how can this be combined to see that Norway is part of the system in the genocidal war because we also take the money from somewhere? And are people willing to vote for these parties who vote for a gigantic NATO military system here in Norway that helps the US-led wars in Ukraine, but also the continuation of the genocidal war in Gaza? It's 401 days of genocidal war today. And I have a really hope when I see now all over Europe, people are, and also in the US, because people are really out on the streets. When it comes to Ukraine war, there was no one here in Norway. It's like 20 people could assemble, and they had to say, Putin is bad as well, or something like that. You can't just say that, you're not delivering weapons. You have to protest against the embassy of the Russian embassy and so on. So, but when it came to see this, on our phones, 24 hours a day, you lie in a bed at night and you watch these horrible scenes. And then it's not the old people who gets awake, because they are watching, the state channel NRK, the Norwegian state channel, and mainstream media. They are kind of always balanced. It's no, it's not a genocidal war. It's just a war, or it's a conflict, or something like that. So, but young people, younger than me and younger than me, we are watching on our phones. So I see that there are so many young people now who wake up. And I think that it's important now also to see, to kind of, this is a wave, and it can't stop. I don't think it will stop. But it also has to have another direction, not just to see the connection between the fight for the stop of the genocidal war in Gaza and other issues. Like it will affect all the economy. It's like a war economy, a genocidal economy. It affects all of us. So we are part of it. We also bear the consequences ourselves, to feel on the consequences. And what can we do? What we are saying, we're not just putting our eyes on Israel, because of course we should put our eyes on Israel, what they're doing. But US, where you come from, David, who is the big elephant, the blue elephant in the room? No one is speaking in the political hegemony in Norway about US. So we say clearly we have to cut the military ties with the US to stop the genocidal war in Gaza. You can't stop that war if you just point at Israel as one small factor. It is a small factor because it gets everything it needs from the US to continue. So, and also in Ukraine, because the Ukrainian war, it also affects people's lives, although there it is, young men who dies, I mean, hundreds of thousands of young men has died. They don't want to give us the numbers. They don't want to give us, because we shouldn't see, you know, we haven't got the images from there. Why haven't we seen them? I mean, all these young men without heads or with splintered, you know, the bodies, you have to put it into bags. I mean, these are all real lives. These are hundreds, thousands of people that didn't have to die. It's like in the first, as you said, David, it's this imperialistic power standing against each other. And where do we stand? Where can we do something? I'm not in Russia. I can't join the peace movement there, but I'm in Norway. And the peace movement in Norway has not focused at all against what can you do in your own country and not just stand there with, you know, with this pointing finger on Russia. That has been, you have to point your finger to Russia, and perhaps you can say something about peace and no to weapons. But I mean that you just have to focus on how can you stop your own. And our own is our own government, what they are doing. And we have to do everything we can on all these fronts at the same time. So I think that is what I deliver the, I mean, kind of oppgave in Norwegian, the task for you. We have to do this, and we have to do it in many ways, but we have to stand together, and I know you will continue and do this together, because many of you I know from the demonstrations, and I know you're doing this, but we have to see all these connections and support each other. So, yeah, that's what I want to say.
Very well said. Not a single member of the U.S. Congress will say that. Not a single one has opposed the war in Ukraine among the so-called peace Congress members in the Democratic Party. Every single one of them. More weapons for Ukraine. Somebody told me last night there was a new enterprise in Norway building tanks. And I flew in over the sky over Norway, and I didn't see flat ground anywhere. I didn't see a bit of flat ground. I saw mountains and lakes. What is Norway going to do and call it a defense department with tanks? They're going to fight trolls for Netflix movies. That's the only thing they could possibly do. Or they're going to put the tanks in Eastern Europe and pretty soon in Africa and in Asia. And, you know, it's a small corner of the world. It's a handful of countries. It's 5 or 6 countries that arm all these wars. And most of the places with the wars make almost no weapons. You know, this is a very strange thing with the war in Ukraine, to have a war in a place that makes weapons. None of these places in North Africa or the Middle East, apart from Israel, are making weapons, and they're coming from here, and they're coming principally from the United States. In the United States, one day, a couple years ago, nobody could find Ukraine on a map. Nobody knew Ukraine was a country. And within a couple of days, random people are stopping you on the street, asking you if you're doing your part to get weapons to Ukraine. This was incredible media, and it's the same media saying the same things in all of these countries, and it's very, very effective, and this is why you have no Congress members and no parliament members opposing this thing. And yes, nobody knows how much money it is. Nobody. You can do polls in the United States. Do you want to move money out of the military into other things? Or do you want to just move money out of the military? And you probably get a majority, a slim majority. But if you sit people down and show them the budget, and like, here's the military, and here's this little sliver for schools and parks, you know, then they want to move huge amounts of money out of the military into environment and education. But they don't know. If you poll them on how much does the military get, they have no idea. not within orders of magnitude. They have no idea. And so you have to tell them that 3% of just the US military budget could end starvation on the entire earth. A little bit over 1% of just the US military budget you could have clean drinking water everywhere on earth, right? So everything you dare dream of and more you could have for little fractions of the US military budget. And people don't know it. They don't know it, and they think the money is limited. And so they say, bring our money home. Stop helping the Ukrainians. Stop helping the Israelis. There are a lot of problems with this, because the money is not helping the Ukrainians. It's killing every last Ukrainian. It's destroying Ukraine. And you don't have to bring it home. You don't have to choose here, there, or there. It's enough money to transform the entire earth, including your neighborhood and everybody else's neighborhood on the entire earth. You don't have to be greedy. You don't have to pick and choose. You just have to be able to understand how much money it is. And this is what we have to work on, because it's very hard for people to grasp. Thanks.
But look on World Beyond War's website. They have a lot of materials there to look at. Last person is Ola Tunander. He's also Swedish, but half Norwegian at least. Welcome, Ola.
Thank you. I would like to challenge you, David, on a couple of points. I think it's in 2009, Prime Minister Hatoyama came to power in Japan, and he promised to close down the Okinawa base. And he didn't succeed, of course. But what you would call perhaps a military-industrial complex or whatever, succeeded with, that was to go with a Coast Guard vessel in front of a Chinese fishing boat, so they collided. So what Hatoyama had done before was that he had a meeting with the Chinese defense people, and they have the defense ministry meeting, and Japan would rely less on the United States. That was unacceptable for the US and for some people in Japan. So they let this Coast Guard vessel go in front of a Chinese fishing boat and collided, and saying that the Chinese fishing boat had rammed the pretty large Japanese Coast Guard vessel. And what happened was that the mass media really started hysteria, started a campaign in Japanese against the Chinese and the Chinese against Japan. And at the same time, you had defense minister meeting, and the defense minister said, we tried to stop this, but they couldn't. We had nothing to say, really, because the media hysteria. And for 10 years, the collaboration between China and Japan was blocked because of this. I could take another example, similar. In the late 70s and early 80s, the peace movement in the Scandinavian countries were pretty strong, and hundreds of thousands signatures against nuclear weapons in the Nordic countries and so on was signed. And the British and the Americans said, this is unacceptable. Some Nordic countries have become a little bit frisky. I mean, the Norwegian prime minister started to speak about the possible Nordic nuclear weapon-free zone and so on. And that was unacceptable for the British and American side, and said that Norway is on a slippery slope, and Sweden is even worse. So what they did was to go with submarines into Swedish waters and Norwegian waters also. And from in 3 years, the Gallup polls told that from it had been 25 to 30% that thought that Soviet Union was a danger, an enemy really, while the rest didn't think that really. In 3 years, it was 83% because of these submarine incidents. They changed the Swedish mentality and also Norwegian and European mentality totally, just because they played the game with the Swedes and to some extent the Norwegians. The Norwegians actually, they said that we didn't make a big deal about it. And we tried to tell the Swedes that they should, don't make a big deal about it. But the Swedes did, because they wanted this campaign. So they changed the mentality. So actually, what was enormous amount of collaboration on the grassroots level was destroyed in 3 years because of rather clever action by some people on the British side and some American side. And so then comes the question, what to do about it? And we know that after the Cold War, in the 1990s, there was an agreement between the great powers. It was some disarmament and so on. So then comes the question, how did it happen? How did we succeed with this development? And you could say that on the one hand, you had the Palme Commission, the Common Security, which was influenced Gorbachev, and Gorbachev said that we should have a zone of détente, a zone of neutrality in Central Europe. So in 1988, he said that we should have a neutral Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary. And that was his idea. And it happened also that Ronald Reagan at the time had read the report about the Able Archer exercise where the Russians actually believed that it will be a nuclear war. And Ronald Reagan was pretty scared about what happened. So he had a rather good deal with Gorbachev. But what was more important was the pipeline. It was a pipeline between Soviet Union and Germany that tied Europe and Soviet together. And you get a kind of mutual trust between the two sides, which made it possible to collaborate. And that was, I think, actually most important. You could say it's a kind of coal and steel community, similar to after the Second World War, that you had some that tied together the both sides. And the gas pipeline actually did the same. And the administrative director of or chief of the Deutsche Bank was financing the whole thing. And he became also advisor to Gorbachev. It was a development for a kind of common European house or home, as Gorbachev said. But Alfred Herrhausen, who was this director, was killed. And Olof Palme was also killed. So they were, you could say, they were pretty efficient in that sense. And so what they have done now, it was obvious that it wasn't possible to stop this pipeline by just telling the Germans, you have to stop the pipeline. You had to start a war to stop the pipeline, to justify cutting the pipeline, because you had to cut off, or that was the American point, you had to cut off Russia from Europe. Because if Russia and Europe collaborate closely, which, was the kind of development we had, then United States will be less important, because Russia would no longer be an enemy. And if Russia is not an enemy, United States would be a regular state that has economic ties with Europeans, but it's not, it doesn't justify the hegemonic role of United States in Europe, which we have now. And you had this, suddenly you get 47 American bases in the Nordic countries in 2-3 years. It has been crazy, you could say. And if you try to stop them, there will be some kind of game played by the Americans and the British. That's my... But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to stop the Okinawa base. It just means that it's very complicated, because they are thinking 2 steps before what yeah, okay, thank you.
Wonderful commentary. You began by saying you were going to challenge me, and I was getting hopeful you were going to say something I disagreed with, and you didn't. And if you thought I said something that disagreed with something you said, I apologize for the miscommunication, because I didn't mean to. I think, well, if there's anything I can disagree with, I wouldn't say that the chief problem is that they think better than we do, that the war makers are thinking 5 steps ahead of the peacemakers. I mean, I think the chief problem is that they have all the money, all the politicians, and all the media outlets. And you can be pretty darn stupid and say just plain crazy stuff and get elected president, for example. It's not a question of intelligence exactly. But I think, it's important for us to realize that they do these pro-war stunts with the Coast Guard boats, with the boats in Sweden. I mean, during the Cold War, there were incidents of the US military and the Soviet military doing stunts to help the others' military funding go up, and because it was a mutually beneficial, and still is, enterprise. And this is what, people cheering for either flag don't quite understand or want to know about. I mean, I sort of agree with how horrible the media is, and with how much the United States is against peacemaking. And, I just think the part of the story that's missing from the positive changes of the, perestroika and so forth, is the people who are not presidents and prime ministers. There were massive popular movements in the Baltic states, in the United States, in the Western world, to cut back the nuclear weapons, to get rid of most of the nuclear weapons, to liberate nations from the Soviet Union by popular action without picking up a gun. These are incredible things. That should be at least as big a part of the story as what the ambassadors and the diplomats and the presidents do. But the other part of the story is that we change minds too. Peace activists can change people's minds more easily, more readily, more effectively than war makers. They need billion-dollar campaigns just in the United States for war, this thing that's supposedly inevitable, it's going to happen no matter what, and yet somehow they have to spend $1 billion every year advertising it. I can go into a classroom and in an hour take a room of students who all raise their hand to say sometimes you need war, and get it down to 1 or 2 students who will raise their hand to say yes. I don't know how long it lasts, because I can't study them for the rest of their lives, but It's not hard. We have basic facts they've never heard that bring them around to peace in less than an hour. We have to figure out how to get them communicated through major media outlets that we don't own, you know, but we stop a war on Iran every few years, and nobody celebrates, doesn't go on the calendar. We stopped a war on Iran again this year. You know, every time they start a war, well, oh my God, the peace movement is so useless and we should just kill ourselves. And, you know, they wanted to carpet bomb Syria. They were days away from doing it. And people in Europe and the United States stopped it. And, you know, we change minds. We affect things. And so the fact that the warmongers are very, very cynical and skillful and slick propagandists and manipulators, you know, we have to be aware of that and take them on and beat them at their own game.
Thank you. I think we have a few minutes more together here, and it's now time if anyone wants to put a question to David. First of all, these people are still with you. You can ask them any day, but it is allowed to ask questions also to the panel here. Will you run around with the mic? So if anyone wants to, yeah, whoever. If anyone wants to put a question now, yeah, my Bente, please.
Okay. Jag ska pröva att stå.
Short questions, please.
Short question. Thank you, first of all. I'm just thinking all the time how to stop the war. Are there other ways of thinking how to loosen up a conflict? And I'm thinking about the book by 3 psychiatrists in California, Vaslavik, Fish, and Weekland. They wrote a book in the 70s called Change. And they had praxis from family therapy. And in order to loosen up a conflict, they made a method, they experienced a method how to shake the people in a conflict, how to really shake them off their place so that they waken up to think otherwise. We have to think otherwise. And I try to illustrate this method. There was a little village in the Middle Age that was surrounded by an enemy. And the people in the village, they had 3 oxes. So the enemy counted that in 3 weeks they would die because they wouldn't have more food to eat. So they started to go up the hill to the village to take the village, because they wanted to take the village. They were hungry in power and wanted to take the village. And they counted that in 3 weeks, they will have no more food. After a week, suddenly the door opens from that little village with the the people who were surrounded. And they threw out an ox to the enemy. And this ox, that was so surprising to the enemy. So the whole play of war was absolutely into pieces. The enemy couldn't take that little village when these people only had 3 oxes and really shared what they had to eat. You understand it? Yes. And I think that is a very beautiful illustration of thinking otherwise. And I always think about Netanyahu and Putin as leaders who are so power hungry. They always want to have. It's like they have a hollow in their soul. And I think, do we have an ox to give them?
Yeah. I think we take 3 questions and then we see what we can gather here.
I wonder if I can speak Norwegian and you can translate for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a
Norwegian
very
person has-
short question. Because young people are asking me, but how, vi har ikke tid, fordi at klimaproblemene er så enorme, krigene er så ødeleggende for alt som er, så tiden begynner å renne ut, og våre lange refleksjoner som vi kan dele. Men hva gjør vi med den dårlige tida vi har? Hvordan kan vi stoppe den galskapen som preger verden? Jeg vil ha gjerne korte svar.
Who will translate it? Yeah. So take the mic there. Take the mic. No. Ta mikrofonen och give a summary. No, you translate the... Yeah, for the public. For the public. We are recording this. I think this is sent to the whole world.
We don't have time. The world is going off the hinges. What do? We don't have time to do reflection. We have to do it now.
Thank you. Okay. David, do you want to
Respond?
respond on those 2? I hadn't any more who asked for the floor. Or anyone by you.
There are 3 kinds of people in the world. Those good at math and those bad at math.
Wow.
I think this is a key point that follows the point some of us were making earlier, that nobody knows how much money it is. That you could not just throw out an ox to your enemy. You could stop a war and give every single enemy a new house and a field and a tractor, and you could build each village a brand new hotel. I mean, just absolutely crazy things you could do instead of a war if you had an understanding of how much money you were spending to blow stuff up. And I mean, what can I say? We don't have any time for many reasons, for environmental reasons, for nuclear reasons, and we need many more people acting far more seriously, far more quickly, with far more radical solutions than what we're talking about. This is part of why young people and disaffected people and struggling people are turning to these stupid right-wing authoritarians, because they're fed up and they're desperate, and they see these proposals to slightly modify the current disaster over the next 20 years. And they want something faster. What they're getting is not a solution. It's not going to improve anything. It's going to be further disaster. But people are fed up with the system, in part because they grasp that even the people who pretend the environment is doing fine, even the people who pretend nuclear weapons are wonderful tools for peace, they grasp that there's an urgency, that things are going off a cliff, and are looking for urgent action. And if we had political movements that were proposing drastic, urgent action in a good direction, they'd be winning political movements.
Anyone more? Yeah, Tore.
Can I have a short comment? This is not going to be popular. But I have heard the coming president of the United States is going to stop all wars. And he did it when he was president in 1945.
He was elected promising to end the war in Afghanistan. The generals told him, don't end it. He said, yes, sir, I won't end it. Biden had to end it. Biden, for whom I have zero respect. The fact that I say something negative about Donald Trump does not mean that I love Joe Biden. But this is Donald Trump, who did song and dance shows celebrating the weapons sales to Saudi Arabia, where he kept the war on Yemen going. Donald Trump, who supported coups around the world, sent missiles into the Middle East, blew up all kinds of people, attacked Russian troops in Syria, even though he was Russia's servant. This is the Donald Trump who wanted Soviet-style military parades down the Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C. This is Donald Trump who wants to kill their families, finish the job. Yes, if he says some good things, push for it. If he will help end the war in Ukraine, work on it. But the guy who had no wars when he was president, let's not invent mythology.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I follow you totally, but I follow you 100% on what is important now. To take the budget, the money that goes into the military, to educate people or to make people understand, what you can do for that money to survive.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's the way.
Right on. And who put more money into the military? Obama and Trump and Biden. And now, Trump again, I promise you.
Okay.
Yes, Jan Öberg, you wanted to comment on this. Did you? Yeah. Just speak. We have a
Okay.
here.
I can't sit down and speak. When I stand up, I can't stop speaking. So, if you think of the ox, that's what all conflict resolution is about. It is to talk with the parties, and they are more than we think, often 2 or 3. It is to talk with all of the parties one-on-one. What are you fearful of, and what do you want, and what do you think you could live with, compromising? And so you find out that if you can describe together with the parties a better future than the one they have, or the one that the war will lead to, they begin to listen to conflict resolution. Oh, do you think we could live a better life in the future? Then maybe we should stop the war. It is always a matter of giving people an opportunity to develop alternatives. Without alternatives, there will be war. But if there are alternatives to the war. So if you take Ukraine, I suggested some 6 years ago the following: 300,000 UN peacekeepers in Donbass. At the time, Vladimir Putin and I were the only one, literally the only ones who talked about the UN in Ukraine. Now, what would the point be? It would be to do with the UN to do what they did in Croatia's Krajina. Namely, Krajina, means a border, and Ukraine means a border, and Krajina in Croatia meant a border, with the 12% Serbs. What you did there was to disarm, the UN disarmed everybody, put the weapons and ammunition into stores with UN locks outside and said, now you sit down and talk. And the Americans did the storm and flash with Croatia, that's another thing. But the idea is you go in, you promise something. So if you take Ukraine, you talk with the parties in Ukraine, you take with all the parties in Ukraine, there are many. There's Russia, there is the countries around it, there's NATO, there's the US, and there's China. And China so far is the only one who has come up with anything that can be useful for solving the Ukraine conflict. Because they don't talk about the solution, they talk about the framework to reach a solution. The Chinese are quite smart on this, but nobody listens in the West, because we think we know what is best for them. So you come up with ideas like, make Ukraine a new Switzerland, neutral, a place where you put all your money and investments into because it has rich resources. Give them aid from both sides, give them non-aggression pacts from Russia and NATO, promise them neutrality that can be more or less guarded or armed with UN people in it, and move the United Nations headquarters from New York to Kiev. Why the hell should the US have the UN in the future headquartered there? They're misusing that host ship. So move it, make Ukraine something so special and so nice and so fascinating that they will stop the war immediately. This is the ox. The other thing I wanted to say is, We don't have time. How do we know that we don't have time? Who wants us to believe that we don't have time? I am sick and tired of dystopias. I'm sick and tired of very good commentators all over the world who say we are on the way to the Third World War, and if there's some kind of problems coming up in Ukraine or Europe, we think it will be for the whole world. It's not necessarily so. But it serves the psychological function of making everybody defeatist and passive. Oh, if we're anyhow having a nuclear war in 2 weeks from now, where the fuck should I work with it? Stop talking about nuclear weapons, and not weapons, but stop talking about that you know that there will be a nuclear war. Stop talking about there will be much more war. And if you think that deep down, stop saying it and work with what you think could be the ox. That is your duty, in my view, intellectually and morally. Don't make everybody sad, defeatist, and drink more red wine because the world is going to hell. I refuse to believe the world is going to hell. And that's where peace movement should start, in my view. And finally, I have one quarrel with David, I think, because you said 2 or 3 times that the new multipolar world would not be better if there was a new empire. May I ask you, which country did you think of would make a new empire?
Well, I didn't say it couldn't be better. I said it couldn't be a solution to a lasting peace.
Hey, don't tell me what you said. I think you were probably thinking that China would become a new empire. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, you're not right. Of course, everybody in recent days has been celebrating BRICS, which includes China.
That's not an empire. You see, the Chinese have lack one thing that the West has, and that is mission. Go out and make everybody the consumers of my Coca-Cola, my bases, my lifestyle, my democracy, my human rights. They don't have that idea. They have no wars anywhere in the world. They have one military base outside China in Djibouti. And they don't want others to be like them. They don't have that idea. They want to be special. They don't sell Confucian politics. They don't sell one-party systems. By the way, there are 8 parties in China, but people don't know that. They don't sell their own model to anybody else. They say, can we work together? You are different from us. Can we work together? There is not going to be a new empire. The United States of America is the last empire in human history. Take my word on that.
Hello, my name is Susanne Urban. I'm member of the board of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in Bergen. Thank you for a wonderful conference. I cannot imagine of any idea more beautiful to get the first real Nobel Peace Prize than World Beyond War. We don't even have the right wording in the languages I know, like World Beyond War. Verden borten for krig. Yeah, kanskje. Maybe we have it. But I have 2 questions. One is, in this conference, I also thank for the possibility to many new thoughts and for the pause, because I've been talking to lots of people I know and to people I don't know. And there is one thought I wonder about, because if we want to end war, isn't it just to cut off the satellites? Who owns the satellites? What do you think of that?
Well, I can try to answer, and everyone else can too, I guess. We know that Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk just had a phone call with Mr. Zelensky, on which Mr. Musk promised that he would continue to get to use his satellites. So we know at least who thinks he owns some of the satellites. In fact, thousands and thousands of them that are filling up the sky with junk. I'm not sure if we could get rid of all the satellites, we would get rid of all the other weapons, but I'm all in favor of trying if you know a way to do it. But get rid of all the weapons, including the satellites? Yes, of course, let's do it. You know, this is... We sort of understand in the United States that so many more people kill themselves and each other and whole rooms full of people because there's guns everywhere. But we don't apply the same understanding to filling up North Africa and Western Asia with weapons and weapons and weapons, and then complaining that when they have conflicts, so many people get killed. Well, yeah, get rid of the weapons. Get rid of the satellites and see if that helps. I don't know, how to get rid of the satellites. And a lot is being privatized so that more and more it's owned by private companies. On election night, they practiced for a nuclear war. They sent a missile from California with 3 non-functioning nuclear bombs into the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And it landed in a little island atoll that they, largely damaged with nuclear weapons back in the 40s and back in the 50s, and have been sending missiles to ever since. And this is a place that's, an apartheid state, where the locals live on one island and commute to do the clean the toilets and then commute back under armed guard. And it's, it's an apartheid state. The U.S. military stole this island. And they're now taking a big piece of this island and making it a rocket launch place for private companies, right? So they're privatizing everything. They're privatizing this place that allowed Reagan to say to Gorbachev, no, we can't get rid of all the nuclear weapons because I have this Star Wars idea where we're going to shoot down the missiles. This is where they try to shoot them down. And they're privatizing it. They're turning it over to private companies. And this is what they're doing with satellites. So do we have any democratic accountability to say we demand, shutting off the satellites? I don't know. I wish.
And we are getting more. I can tell you that Sweden have this agreement now with the US to have 17 bases, but there are also clear progress in the planning of having a satellite place to shoot up American satellites from Kiruna, from S-range in Kiruna. So that's the 18th of this list of bases in Sweden, and we expect also that there will be one in Göteborg soon. So this is all the time increasing instead of going down. But we have to continue a little bit more work.
In Andøya, in Norway.
Yeah, Andøya also. Yeah. So there are many. Anyone who has more energy to put a question here? Yeah, we have one up there. And if there is anyone more, we can take 1 or 2 questions more, and then we finish, I think.
Now I'm wondering, there's been a lot of talk about democracy and peace movement, how to make change, how do we make it? Of course, very few plans, but I also wonder about what Ola spoke about, which is the security state. They wield unofficial power. How do you beat unofficial power? Through official means. No one speaks about it. It's not wielded through democratic power. So that's my question. They through the media, they manipulate people to have wars. This is to continue the security state, which is unofficial power. I'm not sure you can even beat it through official power. I mean, they've sent very, very starch warnings before, so I think what you need is very radical grassroots reform, but I don't have any good framework for it. But I guess that's my loosely worded question. How can you even fight the security state through democratic means?
Should I answer? Somebody else want to answer?
Yeah, Ola.
Yeah. No, I remember in President George W. Bush had advisor called Karl Rove, and he was called George Bush Brain, and he said that he was interviewed by a journalist, something on S, I don't remember his name, and he said we could we could reveal what you are doing. And that's the problem for you. And Karl Rove said, why? It takes long time for you to reveal. And in this meantime, we have done 10 new things. So the problem is, of course, how to square this circle, yes. and it's very, the only thing I could come up with is to work harder, to reveal the actual, the dirty game that's going on all the time, and because at some point, at least, some people would say, we have had enough, and that might happen, So I think that is at least my hope.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we are.
Is it possible to say something about the political kind of proposal there? Because what I'm thinking about is get the hell out of NATO. I mean, if we get out of NATO, they don't have, you won't have these boots on the ground if they're from intelligence or there are American soldiers and so on. So all this apparatus, all these guys, they will not come here. They will not be welcome if Norway was a neutral country. So that's the best thing I can come up with, that we work for being a neutral country. That is the best position we can have in the world, to have less of these kind of apparatus that is behind, or staying here, and it goes into the media system, it goes in all parts of our lives, in the school system as well. So we're not free until we declare that we don't want anything to do with imperial powers. So I think that's the best way to go, but you have to, of course, tell people the connection. And that is our goal, to spread the word. How can we get rid of foreign powers and to be manipulated as we are today? And people are, I think David was all this. There is a kind of a rage here in Norway also, as you have in the Trumpism. And there's not that much in Norway, the Trumpism thing, but this kind of wave that people are so fed up with the state, for example. There's so many, institutionalized the repression of people. People feel it when barnevern, as we have, Nav-systemet. We have institutions that people feel that they have no, real power in their lives. They're small people bowing their necks. So we have also, and this is the kind of, more of a fascist state. And a part of that, of course, is the media system, where we copy-paste what's coming from the US and British media. So, yeah. It's combined, as I say.
Yeah, Ola. I don't dare to say that I worked 15 years as a journalist. Not in this room, I don't say it.
And I have worked 60 years as an informer about injustice and such things. It doesn't seem to stick somehow. No, what I want to say is that we have all here painted a picture of the big, terrible USA with all its power and all its arms and all these things. And it seems impossible to change that. But we also have to keep in mind that USA has the biggest national debt in history, and at present many states have started to try to get free from the terror of dollars, so that the economic future for the big machine of war is not that big as we think. And there are also a lot of cultural and social, economic contradictions in this big country. So I don't think we should be so pessimistic about what others can do. So if we just don't paint up this terrible black cloud, it will be more bearable to do what we can do in our daily life.
Thank you, Ola. David, and then we have one question more, and then we round up. Yeah. Okay.
I want to agree with the last comment. It should be discouraging when somebody asks, can't the media so easily manufacture consent for wars? The reason I find it encouraging is that you don't go anywhere anymore without hearing that question from everybody. Nobody trusts the media. And, you know, this can be dangerous if they don't figure out what they can trust. But I think it's encouraging. I mean, after a popular movement ended a very long war on Vietnam, the US media said we had acquired this disease called the Vietnam syndrome, which meant reluctance to support more wars, right? And even after the war on Iraq was so unpopular, they talked about the Iraq syndrome. This meant resistance to more wars, right? And it's not worn off. It's still a badge of shame in Washington to have supported the war on Iraq to a great extent. And so, you know, Ukraine is the exception. Ukraine is the incredible success of the pro-war media and incredible failure of voices to the contrary. But the notion that the voices for peace, that it doesn't stick because we have to keep doing it over and over and over for our whole lifetime, so do they. They're constantly afraid that people are going to turn against war. They've got disease names for this behavior of turning against war. And, you know, the balance can go either way very easily. And every single media outlet in the United States has told every single person to love the war on Gaza. And the majority oppose the war on Gaza, right? And this is in part because nobody likes the media. Right? And the media was doing better than ever reporting on the misdeeds of Donald Trump in the last days before the election. And every single time they did, it boosted Donald Trump because people hate the media more than anything else. And so I think the fact that everybody is concerned that we might be getting manipulated by the televisions and newspapers is a very, very good thing. As long as we don't throw up our hands and say there is no truth and facts don't exist. As long as we learn how to find good information and how to read through bad information, it's a very, very good thing.
Last question.
Actually, it's not a question, it's more a suggestion. When I go to arrangements like this, thank you for the arrangement. I get inspired and I learn more. And I sit there thinking, oh, shouldn't we do something after? We are here, I'm sure I experience, there are many experienced persons. They have lots of knowledge. And more than me, I go home inspired, tired, maybe I Google something, and that's it. And here we are talking about the power of media, we need voices. I miss, in cases like this, that we have something afterwards. The idea is not, I don't see the whole idea, but think about it. If one could sign up for some work group to do a paper on something, to go to some institution, to, well, we have many of us, we have networks. I don't think I have to say more, but think about it. Could there be some follow-up in a way so that people who want to do something, it's easier if we can sign up and be a group.
Thank you. So now, 3 persons have asked for the floor. It's Jan, it's Ingeborg, it's Dave, and then I will make a final comment myself, I think. So, Jan first.
I'm just picking up on Ola's Friholt's point about not being too pessimistic. The reason I have the views I have is that if you look at macro history very quickly, when do empires go down? When they are over-militarized, when they have lost wars, when they lose legitimacy in the eyes of others, when they have a relatively declining economy, and when nobody listens to them anymore, or fewer and fewer listen to them anymore. And then comes a phase of denial. We are still so good, and that's one reason the Americans are now seeing everybody being enemies. That's because they have to explain why they are going down. But they are not enemies, and it's not because of China the US is going down. It's going down because all empires go down. Add then the factors I said, the fight against the global war on terror, Nord Stream. You can't say the dissolution of the Yugoslavia because that was the first time NATO went outside its own treaty. Today it's a criminal, unlawful organization. And then you can add the fight against terrorism, and you have the Gaza. That is what 11% of humanity does. This is seen by the 89% non-West. And that is why peace movements should prepare themselves intellectually, politically, with all the plans and ideas for what happens in 5 years from now, because that's when peace will be needed, and knowledge about peace will be needed, and masses of people will change the world because the United States has gone as an empire, not as a country. It's a wonderful country in many ways, but the empire will be gone and it'll never come back as an empire again. So we have all reasons to believe that it's important to work constructively now, because that will be needed 5-7 years from now.
Ingeborg.
Yeah. I think we have to acknowledge that many people think that the world is very dark these days and feel anger, sadness, desperation as to what to do. And there are many suggestions that have come today. And of course, for those who are not a member of the peace organizations, I mean, we have the Norwegian Peace Alliance, we have the Norwegian part of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. You can join World Beyond War or the International Peace Bureau, and there are lots of webinars where you can discuss with the world's greatest thinkers on these issues. And I think that for the peace movement, it is important to insist that we do not accept war as a solution to anything, that peace is possible, but it is not possible without all of us. And I like this Quaker suggestion of a peace tax, that we can all refuse to pay the part of our tax that goes for the military as one of the many things. But since money is such an important issue when it comes to war making, we might hit them, so to say, in an essential spot. So, thank you.
David, your final comment.
I would just add there's so many wonderful organizations here and organizers who put this together. I'm sure there will be a lot of follow-up activities and nothing more is needed. But if anybody goes to worldbeyondwar.org and signs the peace pledge there, we will be in touch and eager to work with you on any sort of activities, including making your group an affiliated group or a new chapter, and planning events in coordination with other groups around the world. So please sign up and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much. And you know that if you have missed anything, this meeting has been recorded and you can find it on internet in a few days, I think. So there are not the end, maybe it's the beginning of the end. No, end of the beginning, I don't know. But I have one final comment also, and that is that already on 10th of December, there is an important gathering here in Oslo, 9th, 10th, whatever, you can look it up, when the Japanese victims from the first atomic bombs are getting the Nobel Peace Prize. And this Nihon Hidankyu, I met them first time in, I think it was 1981 or 1982 in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And there was one thing that really learned me something, because the first question I got there was when people heard that there was a Swedish person in the meetings, they came to me and said, "Tell us how you did it in Sweden when you stopped the Swedish atomic bomb." And it learned me something, because we have really done a lot of things. And we have to remember what we have done, what we have achieved, and continue that work that way. Thank you very much for coming today.